Welcome to the U-Turn podcast. My friend, this is Ashley Stahl. I'm your host, and you are in the right place if you're ready to create a business, a career, a personal brand, or just a life that you're so proud of. And every single week, we want to support you by bringing you PhDs, subject matter experts, psychology practitioners, business leaders, all here on the show to elevate your success in business and also in life so that you can leave a legacy, you can amplify your authority, and you can really skyrocket the amount of opportunities you're creating for yourself in your career, whether you're corporate or you're a business owner. And if you are new here, again, my name is Ashley Stahl. I'm an international bestselling author of the book U-Turn, Get Unstuck, Discover Your Direction, Design Your Dream Career. And most importantly, I'm the CEO and founder of Wise Whisper Agency. I'm a top 100 TEDx speaker on the internet, and I was so inspired to create Wise Whisper and help clients craft their signature talk. We've helped hundreds of clients craft their talk, and we've also helped so many of them land spots on some of the biggest stages in the world, including the TED and TEDx stage. And so I am here on a mission to help every changemaker I know impact millions. Also, before we get into this episode, shout out to our friend Andy B. Mackin, the artist that has gifted us this sick new music for the podcast. Let's get into this week's episode. Okay, U-Turn friends, I'm bringing you back a fan favorite, which is Melissa Monte. And if you haven't listened to her podcast, Mind Love, like, where have you been? Because she's been on this show so many times, rightfully so. She's not only my friend, but the host of a podcast with so much self-development, good juju for your life, for your heart, for your mind, for your well-being. Obviously, it's Mind Love for a reason. And she's also working on a book about really resetting the story that you have. I'm guessing it's not just the story about your life, but the story you have about yourself. And there's so much we can get into there. And if you've ever listened to my episodes with Melissa on U-Turn, we're always kind of just jamming. And that's actually not a risk I take as a podcaster a lot of the time. I don't just jam with people because I never know where it's going to go. And it feels like maybe that person doesn't have a lot of content and I'm going to take them down a dead end. And that never happens here with Melissa. So her and I are going to jam on many things: leadership, storytelling, writing books. So yeah, thanks for coming back on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. I love our episodes together, and I know my audience does too.
Oh my gosh. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, I need to get a new mic. Your mic is so good.
It's been a slow upgrade process from the beginning to now, but here I am sounding deep and sexy.
Yeah, you really do. You sound like a illegitimate hotline.
That's a part of my story that we won't get into.
Well, the fact that you're like preggo right now, it's probably like, that's not the illegitimate hotline we were thinking of. Okay, so I want to start with the fact that you have not only written a book, but you've written a book proposal. Talk to us about why this book, why you're thinking about story. Obviously, my agency, like writing so many speeches all the time, I'm thinking about stories all day long. But share with me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was one of those things, you know how when you are working in the space that we work in, I feel like developing your IP is kind of a whole journey in itself. What I thought I stood for has evolved so much over the years, but I've always had these little kind of subsections of my interests. And you know me, where I go really deep on these like random tangents where you're like, wait, why do you know so much about that one thing? And one of those things has actually been like ancient wisdom, theology, the origins of the Bible, how it's been manipulated over time just because of my religious upbringing. And so I spent a lot of time in the last few years just diving into that. And I thought it was just like my side hobby, that it had nothing to do with it. But I started understanding how one of the big things that I'm always sharing about within my friendship circles is how biblical literalism is the worst thing to happen to the Bible. when Jesus was alive, for example, nobody really took those things literally. There was a reason he spoke in parables, and the deeper you were in his inner circle, the more sort of mystical that you'd get. It was a lot of symbolism, and it tied more closely into Eastern religions and things like that. So sounds like a tangent. However, I got into this pocket of understanding that the Eleusinian mystery schools in ancient times, people would actually travel thousands of miles to basically go in a cave, and people would reenact different stories like the descent of Persephone, and they would leave completely changed, almost like they were on psychedelics. And something came together with my understanding of neuroscience from 550 episodes on the topic. For example, Dan McAdams at Northwestern University has spent decades researching something called narrative identity. It's how the stories you tell about your life literally become your psychological reality. So if you have a fragmented life story, you have worse outcomes than those who have a really cohesive life story, life narrative. And so they have higher levels of mental health, well-being, resilience. But I also understand story from the marketing angle. A good marketer knows that you don't change behavior, or you don't help people make decisions through facts and figures. Russell Brunson, for example, calls it the epiphany bridge. So you walk them through your journey from your old belief system through the moment that disrupted everything to the new opportunity you discovered. So people buy transformation through story instead of logic. And so all of a sudden I'm seeing story through these three angles: that ancient wisdom perspective with sacred initiation rites in ancient Greece, and I started to see it as almost a consciousness technology. So when I had this epiphany, I just started writing, and I realized how much my own transformation, really, if I brought it down to one thing, it was reinterpreting my own life story, the way that I told what has happened to me, the traumas that I've gone through that victimhood lens, to making myself the hero of my own story. And so as I started writing, it was just all coming together, and I got really excited about it. And that is sort of the pieces of my book, where part one is my story through that lens, and the teaching points of really understanding how I was seeing my story. And then part two is the science of story, what it's doing to your brain, but also the history of story, like I was sharing with you. And then part three is really how to use that understanding to change your own life outcomes.
Okay, I know that a lot of people are asked all the time, like, what's your story? Who are you? And sometimes it can actually feel kind of boring, because you're like, ugh, I have to tell them who I am again. It's like, you already know who you are on paper, at least, right? Like, what would be your thoughts on like how people could start to cut through that feeling of like, oh, here's the story again? Like, how would you start to reimagine or rethink your story?
I like to take people through 7 steps. And so these 7 steps aren't reinventing the wheel, really. You're going to notice that it really overlays the hero's journey with one extra step that I think people miss if they're trying to use their story for a purpose. So you start with what I call the algorithm. This is the story kind of running your life without you knowing it. It's all of the patterns, the past experiences, beliefs, the conditioning that you've picked up. You didn't really consciously choose this story. It was given to you. And this is really important to know, especially if you're going out into the world teaching, because so often this is where people are stuck. They're in this, like, why is my life this way? Why can't I rise above this one ceiling? Why do I keep attracting the same relationships again? So that's where I like people to start and get really clear on that. And so if you are just trying to figure out like what you're meant to do, how you're meant to serve, go broad with this. Really go through everything you were taught about success, love, worth, identity. But if you actually already know what you're doing, go through that lens. Like, say you are helping people overcome addiction. Look at what you were taught about that one specific thing. So there's 2 ways to kind of approach that. Step 2 is the disruption. This is that sort of shock that breaks the loop. Sometimes it's a trauma or a crisis, but sometimes it can be something you've heard somebody say, but oftentimes it's kind of disorienting. Like, hold on, maybe things aren't quite as I thought they were. Step 3 is the awakening. It's seeing the pattern for what it is. Sometimes these kind of step 2 and 3 sort of happen overlaid on each other. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's really when the fog lifts. You start to see the pattern for what it is. You're like, okay, I'm the one that keeps choosing this type of man. I'm the one who keeps ending up in this type of thing. I keep putting myself in these situations, whatever that it is. So a lot of times stories from your past start to make sense in a new way.
Mm.
Step 4 is the resistance. This is the other part that people often get stuck in if it's not the algorithm. It's the battle between old and new, because you see the old story, but it doesn't really let go easily. So this is where fear and resistance and identity crises show up. And so, how often do we know what we need to do to fix our lives, but we just have a hard time doing it? Like maybe we're like, okay, we know we need to go to the gym, but we're not going there. We know we need to stop eating cupcakes every night, but we're not doing that. So what are those things, whether it's the emotional fears or doubts, but also like what are the habits that you're still fighting? This is another part that you can really connect with people in if you are speaking to an audience. Because like I said, often another spot that people get stuck. But step 5 is the choice. It's the moment that you committed to change. You're like, okay, I'm done with all the old shit. Let me actually make the change. Like, what do I need to do? Do I need to buy the new gym membership, hire a trainer? What is it? And it's the exact moment that you decided to change for real. And oftentimes, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but oftentimes when you really go deep in these moments, when you're telling the story, this is where you can hook people in and almost kickstart their transformation so that they want more. It's that moment where you're like gripping the steering wheel and you can't get yourself to go into the job, or that visceral moment. This is when you want to make people feel it. I think a big mistake people often make is they go deep in their trauma, and the audience has a hard time recovering from that. And they have a hard time seeing you as an authority figure to follow as well. So step 6 is the embodiment. It's where change meets action. So you're no longer just thinking differently, you're living differently. So what are all of the actions, habits, choices that solidified your transformation? If you are a coach or a leader or something, this often becomes your curriculum. And then 7, this is the one that I think people don't spend enough time on. It's really the gold, as I call it. It's extracting that deeper meaning and purpose. And so the story isn't about just what happens, it's about what it means. And this is how a very specific story, like if you've heard mine before, I went to jail and got a felony for somebody else's crime, highly unrelatable. But the meaning underneath is many of us put somebody else before ourselves. Many of us ignore our own red flags. Many of us aren't really living from the inside out. We're actually living from the outside in, trying to belong. And so those are the things that connect people. So this gold is really important to spend time on, because this ends up often being your purpose or your message. So that's kind of the framework I help walk people through. And when you have these written down, even if you don't know exactly how to put it together into a well-written story like you help people with, or I've helped people with, you're going to see something new out of your story than you've often seen. I just worked with somebody who thought they were a relationship coach. And when he went through these steps, he realized that part of his story was actually having ED from a brain tumor and kind of figuring that out. And so he thought he was working with intimacy. But when he saw that, he really saw the symbolism under what that meant. The brain tumor was literally sitting in his pineal gland, the seat of your intuition. And that's what he had been ignoring. And so when you have these listed out in this order, you are often able to see a pattern that you weren't able to see before.
I love this. And it's funny that you call it the gold from the story. We call it the soul. So it's like the foreground is the information about what's happening, but the background is what it's really about for you, for the audience, for life. It's really fun to hear you find that. I'm not surprised we're friends in that you found that. It's like, it just highlights, like, having just moved back to New York. It's like, it's you've seen me with women and friends and how much they mean to me. And it's interesting here because I don't have the same thing here, which is like big for me. And I have a certain type of friend. And so I've been on like friend dates, and it's like when I really think about the list of all the things my friends are, they're into wellness, they're into mindset, they're into increasing their vibration, they're very reflective, they're communicators, they are personal developers, like they're entrepreneurial, like the list goes on. But the fact that I'm talking to you and you just grabbed that and how you see stories is just so pointed. And so I hope people really hear that and there's another thing we help people understand is if you want to move people through your story and you just give them good tips or good information, that's fine. But if you really want to transform them and help them connect to you and fully be present and listen to you, it's that piece you're talking about, what you call the gold or what I call the soul, where you look beneath the story you're sharing, beneath the tips you're giving, and you ask yourself, what is this story really about? We wrote a speech about racism. And when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, these are some really good pieces of content about racism and very educational. But when I zoomed out of the talk, you would call it the gold, I called it the soul, was this is a talk about feeling separate. It's a talk about feeling isolated. It's a talk about feeling like nobody's betting on you. It's a talk about feeling like the world is betting against you. And anyone, whether they're interested in being educated about racism, which I hope they are, or not, can relate to that understanding and to that feeling of like, it feels like people are betting against me. Um, and when somebody that's a speaker has a talk like that, if they can realize what it's really about is this feeling that people feel and being able to speak to that, ask questions about that, ground on that, I think your communication can land so much further with people. Um, I don't know why I want to ask you this, Melissa, but like if you looked at your life and you were like, you know, my story and all the information and content is in the foreground, but in the background there's the gold. Like, what would you say is the message that you've gotten from your life story so far? Like, what are you really here to learn, do you think?
I spent decades trying to find myself. And I think the big shift happened when I realized that that was never the goal. And I'm not even sure that that's possible, because how do you find yourself if you are other than seeking outside of it? Like that's what we tend to do. And so much of it was, you know, maybe I'll go to this moon ceremony. Maybe I'll go to this next workshop. Maybe I'll hire this coach. And I was like waiting for them to tell me or to like discover something. But the big shift happened when I realized that the whole process is creating yourself. So in that finding myself period, I'm sitting there and I'm reiterating that I don't know who I am and somebody else is going to give me those answers. And so when I finally flipped it to like, no, this whole thing is creation. Every single thought is sending ripples into my reality. Every belief I leave unchecked is creating what shows up for me in my life, creating what I'm able to see, which opportunities that might even already be there, but I just can't see them because of my belief system. Then I realized it became so much easier. And so now it's really a process of conscious creation. And how do I do that with as much intention as possible?
Mm. When I look at my life, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I feel like, you know, Gina DeVee, she always
Yeah.
tells me, she's such a brilliant woman. She always tells me, she's like, you're either in the school of love, money, or health, like in your life. And when I look at my life, like I don't think I've really been in the school of health. Like I've had Lyme disease and things like that that are allegedly like could be really horrible, but luckily I've been okay. Um, I feel like if people look at me, I'm 38, I just found the right guy. Hopefully, how many times have I hoped that? Some friends will be like, you've been in the school of love. You want to be a mother and you're 38 and you're still whatever. But my body has registered myself in the school of money. Like I made a lot of money. I lost a lot of money. You did an episode on Mind Love about that forever ago, right? I have an agency right now that is scaling and growing. And I am feeling, Melissa, the fear of fucking God inside of me over this thing. Like every night I can't sleep. I feel this like deep feeling in my body. I don't know if it's because the world we live in is like full of con artisty, scammy things where like, and you know, Pentagon me, it's like you could take the girl out of the Pentagon, but it's like the justice and the doing the right thing and the tell the truth and the integrity. So it's like I'm redoing my legal agreement. I'm like, I will disclose any hurdle these clients could face in getting booked for a speech by us. Like I will disclose anything. Like I'm just neurotically going through it. And it's like this fear beneath it of like, am I allowed to make this much money? Am I allowed for this agency to actually scale and grow? Like, does life not have to be a financial
edge like anymore. Like I've gotten very used to making a comfortable and nice living, but I have not built a life financially where I've gotten wildly ahead, right? Like I've done well, but like wildly ahead. My little brother, he could retire if he wanted to, with how smart he's been with his life and himself. And I've never prioritized that. I've always prioritized creativity. So I've been in the school of money. And if I look at my life overall, it's almost like the gold or the soul message is something about like my own capability, like showing myself that I'm capable, like I can have the things I want. And I've just been on this journey to experience it. What challenges have you had so far in your own story that have kept you from being where you want to be? Or what would you say to everybody listening if they're facing a challenge on their story?
I feel like it's just a roller coaster of challenges the whole time. But what has shifted is my relationship to those challenges. So and I can even see it before I really knew better. Like there's the story I often go back to, that ending up in a jail cell at age 22, having a felony, wondering how I was going to get a job and explain the crazy story on 2 lines of a job application. And then that was my sort of slingshot to entrepreneurship, because I still did have this idea that I deserved success and I couldn't see how I was going to get it through the traditional route. So it ended up being kind of a blessing in a way, because a lot of people go into entrepreneurship 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because it's super scary and you kind of have to be a little bit crazy. It's not comfortable, but it felt like my only option. So I leaped right in and I just kept going. And I had no idea what I was doing at first. Like things went up and down. I wasn't making a lot of money in the beginning. Then I had my first course, then first coaching program and all of that. But even right before that, I lost everything right before I met my husband. My job that I loved shut down. My landlord said she was selling our place, and I crashed my car. And I was so much more peaceful through that. I remember saying to people asking me, "Aren't you freaking out?" And me responding, "This definitely isn't the worst thing that happened to me. Like, this has happened before. Like, just trust the process." And I had some in savings and happened to meet my husband 1 week later and had all of this free time to just sort of spend time in Big Bear falling in love. So that one worked out for me. But I think most recently too, things were going really well. I had just launched something new that I was excited about, and I have my family up here. I was really happy where I was. We got pregnant with our third. The due date was going to be exactly the same as my last 2, which is just wild in general. Like, how is that even possible? And I ended up having a miscarriage. And it was at a time where we were being evacuated from our house. My husband was having a medical emergency with cluster headaches, which shouldn't even be called headaches. They're like a neurological disorder that's known to be the worst pain in the world. And it really felt like everything was being taken. Like that's the worst I've felt in a decade, probably. But one thing that I'm often sharing with people is, so often it feels like we're doing all this work and then it's like, I'm back to square one. Like, why is this happening again? And so many of us have seen that entrepreneur, like here's the journey of an entrepreneur, but it's also just life, where it's like this sort of up and down graft of hills, but it's an overall upward trajectory. But I would actually argue it's more like a spiral. And so it's like winding up a mountain. And so sometimes you're at a spot where you're like, I just saw this view. I'm at the exact same view that I've seen over and over again. Why can't I get over it? But it's from a slightly higher perspective. And so I was able to see that and experience it as I was going through it. And I was just like, okay, in the grief, I couldn't ask, what is in this for me? I wasn't ready. I just wanted to grieve, but I knew enough to just feel. And I knew enough also to really watch the meaning that I was attaching to it, the meaning that I was giving to what my body was capable of, what this meant for my life, and just feel the sensations. And so it passed through me a lot faster. And then when I was at a strong enough point, I could say, what was in this for me? And it's not always as clear as like a one-liner or a slogan, but I became someone through that. And I now trust that when I'm going through something really dark, And I don't need to know it in a way that's even tangible or that I can easily say to people, but I can feel myself becoming stronger, more resilient, understanding more depth, having more empathy for people. And so for me, I think it's been really beautiful to discover that trust that I have inside of myself, that now I know, like, sure, throw something else at me and it might really hurt, but I'm not just going to survive. I'm going to make something out of it.
Mm, mm. Well, what am I not asking you about story before we go anywhere that everybody should really know? Because I know for me, as a leader, this is the strongest I've ever felt. And you would think the longer you live, the stronger you feel, but that's not always the case, right? Like, but I do feel like this is the first time that I sit in business meetings and I am presented problems because I've heard a lot of entrepreneur friends be like, I'm just a problem solver. And they say it with this levity. And I'm like, like, for years, I've been like, do I want to be the person that people come to with problems? Like, is this like a fun path for me? Like, do I want to be a problem solver? I kind of like having easy times. Like, I'm not afraid of that. I enjoy that. Some people don't like easy times. And it's only recently where I'm facing different business challenges and I'm being like, oh, thank you for showing me this challenge because I'm capable of fixing it. I'm capable of problem solving it. Now it's showing me something I needed to know. There's this deeper gratitude and more resilient mindset I've had. And the narrative in my head about who I am, what I can handle is getting wider, is getting bigger. And I think sometimes about people who hold a really big business with a lot of problems. Um, I was talking to a coach the other day and I'm like, I'm afraid of this and I'm afraid of that. And she's like, Ashley, that stuff is just business. And then another friend, she does about 10 million a year. I'm like, we're scaling, we're growing. I'm so scared. She's like, what if people want refunds because they don't like me, even though we're great? She's like, what are you talking about? Like, I always expect like 5% of people just to hate us and want a refund. It's like a different aperture that these leaders, a different story that they're playing at that make things that feel not okay to me. Suddenly they're actually totally okay. And when I get off the phone with them and I kind of swim around in their story, mine feels expired. And I'm like, oh, I like theirs better. It makes everything feel better. It makes everything feel more approachable. But I've had to get there through a lot of pain, like a lot of pain and fear. So I don't know. Do you have a message for everybody who's maybe in that pain or in that fear?
Yeah. I mean, you even just sort of said it. It takes me back to the studies I was telling you about with the coherent life narratives versus the fragmented ones. And when you see those little things, it's a fragment in the story of your hero's journey. So imagine everything goes really well. And again, really well includes the 5 to 10% hating you, but you still scale and you continue to grow, and you might have a Reddit thread that's bashing you, but you've got 10x the positive reviews on Trustpilot or something. I'm getting all geeky over here, but it reminds me of, that old Buddhist parable where it's the farmer that works on his crops and one day his horse ran away and his neighbors came to visit and was like, such bad luck and you must be so sad. And he said, we'll see. And then the next morning the horse returned bringing 2 other wild horses, and the neighbors were like, how wonderful. Your horse came back and you got 2 more. What great fortune. And he says, we'll see. And then the next day his son tried to ride one of the untamed horses, was thrown and he broke his leg. And the neighbor came and was like, oh, now your son can't help you with farming. Terrible luck. He says, we'll see. But then the military officials come the next week and they're trying to recruit people to the army, and they saw the son's leg was broken. So they passed him and they said, oh, such great news. You must be happy. And he just said, we'll see. I love that story because it reminds me of even my husband. Last year, his biggest client, we were doing ads for them. And funny enough, it's one of those things where, again, creating a business, it's like, do we even want to do ads? That's not our bread and butter, but like it was a really lucrative arm of the company. So he didn't want to cut it off. But then they ended up saying, and he even went down to meet up with them and like, we're actually going to do this in-house. And he's like, oh my God, that's like 6 figures we're not getting this year. super upset about it. Well, this year, that same client ended up getting sued for their ads. And it's like some sort of class action lawsuit of almost going after Facebook too. It's some like cookie thing where they're tracking something they shouldn't be. And he was just like, oh my God, remember that Buddhist parable? Like if you would have told me in that moment where I just felt like my world was being wiped out from under me from loss of revenue, and now say like, no, but they're going to be sued for only their work of 2024 ads. Like I would have been like, okay, you can have them. And so you never really know what's going to happen. And again, I think it's so much of like, who are you becoming through that? How do you integrate this one moment into your story? Can you sit there and just work with it until it's cohesive? Whether you have to talk to somebody who is making more revenue than you or have more experiences in this and has a slightly different mentality that you can adopt into that, but take the time to do that and really integrate it in. Spend time making your life narrative as cohesive as possible, and not just what you've gone through, but also where you're going. How is what you're going through now going to help you become the person that's standing there in the position that you want to be in? And I think if we all spend the time to consciously do that, that is conscious creation at its finest, because like I said before, you only really have two choices: consciously create or unconsciously repeat. And so it's your job to make the unconscious conscious.
Mm. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's so fun for people to be able to hear you. And obviously this won't be the last time. Once your book comes out, we're going to go way deeper. Yeah, everybody feel free to tag Mind Love Melissa and me. Let us know what you think of the episode and send us questions. Like, I just think this is such a cool episode and conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a blast.
Always.
Thanks for tuning into the U-Turn podcast. I hope you learned so much in this episode and you're putting it into action today. We would love to hear from you. Slide into my DMs at Ashley Stahl or leave a written review if you're inspired. It would mean so much to us. Be sure to subscribe to the show because, as you know, the more subscribers we get, the better the guests we can bring you. And in the meantime, if you're looking to skyrocket your personal brand and impact millions, head on over to wisewhisperagency.com to learn more about how we can help you craft your greatest talk of your life, how we can help you get booked on some of the biggest stages in the world, even the TED or TEDx stage. We'd love to hear from you, and that's it for this week.
Trying to solve, always think you know it all, been thinking about you up against that wall. It's too late, I fell on every fall. Holding ground on hearts, I'm holding ground on holding ground on late night drive. What you trying to do tonight? I swear you don't even try. Yeah, you still try and make you mine, but I don't think you like guys. I don't think you like guys. I don't think I should try. I guess it's time to give up, but I don't wanna give up, give up, give up. No, 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 no. Scrolling through my phone today, I saw a photo of you. Really thought that I deleted all the photos of you. Forgot how it felt just to be normal with you. Forgot how I felt till I saw you. What you trying to do tonight? I swear you don't even try. Yeah, you still look stupid fine. Wish I could try and make you mine, but I don't think you like guys. Late night drive. What you trying to do